Merry crafting! I'm excited to tell you about this week's video. We're going to use cookie cutters, a Christmas tree, and a wood crate and incorporate them in different designs on this video. And as you can probably guess, these will all be Christmas themed. I am part of a playlist called Just Our Imagination, put together by Kathy Jo DIYs and Rustic Lace DIYs. Their links are listed in the description box below. Please check them out and give them some love. Let's get started with craft number 1. So I'm going to start this craft out with a budget wreath from Walmart, and it was $3.49, and it's about 3 or 4 times the size of the wreaths that you can get, or thickness of the wreaths you can get at the Dollar Tree, which is why I went with this one instead. Once you're done fluffing out the wreath, I did take this outside and did a quick coat of spray paint on it, and I just lightly dusted it to give it a snow look, and then we're going to set that aside to dry. So let's get started with some of our embellishments. I'm starting with some cookie cutters here, and using some Rub and Buff, I'm going to take that and I'm going to brush that over the top and around the edges of these cookie cutters. And this will give it a nice golden look, so that when I put this onto the wreath, they're really going to stick out and pop. So while the cookie cutters are drying, I'm going to grab some of this ribbon. And this ribbon I did get at Walmart. And I'm going to start with this white and gold ribbon. And I'm going to cut the first strand at 24 inches. Next, I'll cut another strand at 20 inches. So I'm going to set the 24-inch ribbon aside, and we're going to work with the 20-inch ribbon. And this 20-inch ribbon, we're going to make a loop, and we're going to hot glue that loop together. And this is going to be the first layer of our bow. I'm going to repeat that step with my other 2 ribbons, just using the 20-inch ribbon to make our little loop and the 24-inch ribbons for our tails. And after those have been glued together, we're going to stack them up like this. So we're going to fold the little tails in like a little V shape. And I just find that stacking them up first to make sure everything looks the way I want it to before I twist everything together makes it just lay out a little nicer, and I don't have to redo anything. And then I'm just going to layer the little loops over the top. And once I've figured out how I want to do this, I'm going to go ahead and grab a little piece of pipe cleaner, and I just cut that in half because I don't need that whole strip for this. And we're just going to gather all of this together and pinch it in the center. And sometimes it's easier with the thicker ribbons to kind of pinch one and add another and pinch another. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, just to make sure that everything is layered and looks really nice together. And then we'll use that little piece of pipe cleaner, and we're just going to twist that around the center of this bow. So I looked at this bow and I'm like, I kind of want it to be a little bit more fluffy. So I decided to add a 4th bow to the top of this. So what I did was I just quickly made another one of these little bows, but this time it was not quite as big as the other one. And we're just going to go ahead and take that pipe cleaner and wrap it around the center just to kind of fill that in. So it'll be a nice little shorter bow. And then I'm using a little piece of ribbon to just hot glue around the center and around the pipe cleaner to cover everything up and make it look really pretty. And once I completed that, I forgot to add a way to attach this bow to our wreath. So after I've fluffed this bow out, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to add a little piece of wire right underneath where I hot glued that ribbon, just so I have a way of attaching this bow onto the wreath, so I'm not wondering what to do when I try to put the wreath together. And last but not least, I'm just going to dovetail all of the ribbons on this bow. So I did get a few picks for this wreath at the Dollar Tree, and it's these cute little pink curly cues and gold balls. And I got 3 of each of these items to put into our wreath. And now let's put our wreath together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spread out these 3 sets of picks and put them into the wreath. And I'm just sticking them in right now so that way I can rearrange them if I need to, and making sure that everything is facing the direction I want it to go. And once I get all of these into position where I want them, instead of using hot glue, I'm gonna flip this wreath over, and I'm going to use some zip ties to zip tie these items into place. So I know that a lot of people have a preference, either gold or silver, and I'm usually a silver person, but in the last few years I've noticed that I've really liked putting gold into my designs as well. So I'm trying some new things this year, using more gold in my designs and silver in some of my other ones, just to kind of mix things up. So what do you prefer, gold, silver, or a combination of both? So next it's time to attach the cookie cutters. And I'm using some gold ribbon here, and I'm just going to tie the cookie cutters in between two of these sets of picks. And I was going to do 3 cookie cutters on this wreath, but then after putting this together, I decided that I only needed 2 because with the bow, I wasn't going to see that third one. So that is why now you only see 2 cookie cutters. So we just tie this little cookie cutter onto our wreath here. And then next I'll put the other cookie cutter right on the other side, and we'll repeat the same step. So I wanted to add another bow on top of the cookie cutters, and I used some more of that pink ribbon that we used earlier, and I made just 2 basic little pink bows, and I'm going to hot glue them onto our little cookie cutters here on top of where we tied the cookie cutter onto the wreath. And once that glue is dried, I go ahead and trim any excess gold ribbon off of the cookie cutter, just so we don't quite see that ribbon, and it just kind of makes it look more seamless. And I'm doing the same thing now on the other side of the wreath. So out of the camera view, I did attach a ribbon, a pink ribbon, to the top of this wreath to use as a hanger. And now I'm going to go ahead and just wrap that piece of wire that was on the bow around that ribbon and around the wreath itself. And now we have an amazing wreath ready to hang on our door. On to craft number 2. So for this craft, we're going to start with 2 of those wood crate boxes that you see all over the Dollar Tree. And I'm using my Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm going to stain both of these boxes on the inside and the outside of the box. And if you haven't done this before, I'm using a little baby wipe, and I'm just wiping the stain all over it, and then I'll wipe off any excess and then let them dry. Once those items are completely dry, we're going to grab some of our wood glue, and I'm just using a little bit. I don't want it to kind of squeeze out of the boxes once I attach them. So I'm using a toothpick to kind of layer that glue really lightly around the whole entire rim of the box. And then I'm using a little bit of hot glue just so it will stick together quicker while the wood glue adheres. Next, I'm stacking this one box on top of the other so that we can still put items in at the top. I have this stencil from Chalk Couture in my stash, and I'm not a rep or anything. I kind of like to mix lots of different products in with my crafting. So I'm actually using this Chalk Couture stencil with a different type of chalk paint that I usually get on Amazon, just because it's a little bit more economical. This is Vintage Lace from Redesign. And I've had no problems mixing the different chalk paints and stencils together. So if you ever are thinking, oh, can I do that? Totally, no big deal. These are just great tools that you can use. But I really liked this stencil, and I thought this would really work well with this challenge. So we're just going to stencil this onto the outside of the box. And this stencil is kind of a 3-part step. So there's 3 little stars that go on top of each one of these trees. So I need to do that next, but I wanted to make sure everything was dry first before I put the next set of stencils over the top of the trees. And I'm just going to do it in the same color because I like that farmhouse look with the white and the wood. So we're just going to do some more of that vintage lace from Redesign, and we will pull these off, and they look so cute. I love how this turns out. So now that this box is complete, we're going to go ahead and add some of these cute little, I think they're called bottle brush trees, to our box. And one is in silver and one is in gold. And I had this cute cookie cutter that was a star shape, and it's a smaller size cookie cutter, so it will work perfect to go on top of the tree. So we're going to use some hot glue there, and I was a little nervous about it not sticking to the top of the tree, but the hot glue worked really well. You just had to hold it on top for a little bit longer than you normally would, and once it was glued on, it worked great. And then for the other tree, I'm using those wood stars that you can get at Dollar Tree, and I just painted it white and brown and then used some rub and buff on the top to give it that gold look. And here is everything put together. This is my favorite project of the night. I love how this turned out. Craft number 3. So I found these cute little scarecrow hats at the Dollar Tree, and I thought these will make really good top hats. So that is what we're going to do. I'm putting one of these little hats on a skewer so it'll be easier to paint, and I'm removing the little embellishments that were on this hat. And using our paint from Folk Art, it's a black acrylic paint, I believe it's black licorice, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint this hat. And I find having skewers in your craft room is a great little tool to have. I reuse them after I've used them before, so that's why you see some other color paints on the skewer there itself. But I just keep a jar of them in my craft room, so it makes it easy for me to paint little knickknacks or beads. So in my button stash, I found these cute little white buttons, and I needed them to be black. So I just put a piece of painter's tape on a piece of cardboard and just painted them with the acrylic paint. And those will be the eyes for our little snowman we're making here. And next, I found this little bead, and it's almost like a carrot shape, and that's why I want to use it. And we're going to paint this orange for the nose. So I'm grabbing one of those skewers again, and I'm using the pumpkin color chalk paint by Waverly. And it did take like 3 or 4 coats till I got a nice orange color that I liked for my nose. Now I grabbed this ribbon from Walmart last year, and I absolutely love their ribbon, so definitely check those out. And I just cut that to 9 inches, and we're going to use that as our scarf. Next, we're going to grab some red ribbon, and I'm just going to add that around the edge of the little hat. And we're going to use some hot glue to hot glue that into place. And I'll trim any of that excess ribbon right off. And where the seam is for that ribbon, I'm going to add a few embellishments. So if you're like me, you probably have a whole bunch of picks that have little pieces clipped off of it that you've been using for multiple things. So I clipped off a little piece of greenery, and I'm just going to hot glue that right on the seam of the ribbon that I put onto this hat. And next I had some red berries, and I'm just cutting a little cluster of 3 or 4 of them, and I'm going to add that right over the top of that greenery. And I think this makes the hat look really nice. Now let's put our snowman together. It was great to use the skewer on the hat because it gave us a hole to put the top of the hat onto our little tree. And this is one of those bottle brush trees from Dollar Tree that has the 3 little layers. Next, we'll add our scarf. And I didn't even have to hot glue it. It stuck onto the bottle brush really nice, so it worked out perfect. Next, we'll hot glue the nose and the 2 eyes. And then we're going to have a cute Mr. Snowman. Isn't he cute? I love how this turned out. Craft number 4. So we're starting out with this 3D DIY craft kit from the Dollar Tree and one of those little bends. So this step is optional, but I stained my little box using Waverly Antique Wax. Next, I'm using that 3D piece and I pulled out only the trees. And using a cutting board and an X-Acto knife, I'm just taking off the little tabs that you would use to have those stand up. And once I cut everything off that I can using the X-Acto knife, I do grab my zip sander, or a sanding block would work fine, and I just sand that smooth so everything is nice and finished. Now I'm grabbing some Waverly chalk paint in the color Truffle, and we're going to paint these trees. And I'm not the best painter, but I figured I could handle trees. So we're going to do a little bit of like a V shape here and just paint that down so you can see the trunk of the tree. And I'm using an angled flat brush, if that matters. And once we get that done, I'm going to let those dry. So for painting these trees, I'm going to use 3 different color greens, and we're going to sponge them onto the leaves. And the 3 different colors I'm using is English Ivy from Apple Barrel, Kelly Green from Apple Barrel, and Moss Green from Waverly Chalk Paint. And you can see I'm just using a foam brush, and we're just tapping the tree leaves onto the trees. And I do this a few different times using the different colors so you get a lot of dimension when you're doing all of these tree branches. And I want to make sure this is really dry because the next step is adding snow because it's Christmas time. So I'm using Waverly chalk paint and plaster, and I'm also using a rounded brush, but this one does have bristles, and I'm just really lightly adding a little bit of snow all over my trees. So I decided I wanted to lighten the box up just a little bit, so we're going to use that same brush and the plaster paint again, and we're just going to dry brush around the outside of the little wood bend, and it'll just give it a nice snowy look on the outside of this bend, but also gives it that rustic look where you can still see the wood. Now let's put everything together. I'm going to take some wood glue, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the bottom half of these trees and a little bit of hot glue to help everything adhere quickly. And once we've got the glue added, we're going to take this really carefully and line it up with the bend and have that just right on the front cover of this bend. And once that is dry, we are ready to make up our little gift basket. So for this gift basket, I'm just going to add a little bit of green stuffing and 2 cute little soaps. But you could use this gift basket for lots of different things. You could do something like a little baking kit, or maybe even like wine cork and wine charms or something like that. But you could individualize it for different people. And I just love how this turns out. Well, thank you again for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And please remember, craft more, stress less.